Back in October 2017, a US specialty coffee roaster posted a photo on Instagram. And the photograph is of Murray Cooper, a 6-foot middle-aged white guy. He's wearing a dirty t-shirt, and he's standing in between 6 buckets of coffee cherries. This is what it read. Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Our newest coffee offering is a single producer lot grown by Murray Cooper in the Nenagao region of Ecuador. This is our first year purchasing from Murray, who grew up in Kenya and moved to Ecuador to become a forest ranger and photographer. But in that text is a glaring mistake. Murray is not Kenyan. He is a white South African. And a number of roasters were selling his coffee saying he was from Kenya. He tried to clear up the confusion by sending a bunch of emails.
Just saying, listen, I'm kind of proud of my South African heritage, and I'm a bit of an international figure because of my photography. And I know I'm posting on Facebook where I've got a lot of followers, and I'd like them to know that I am actually South African, not Kenyan, but it wasn't changed in a whole year. And I was constantly being asked about the whole Kenyan story. So I think a lot of people thought I was bullshitting, trying to be cool in Kenyan coffee kind of guy. Yeah, well, maybe it's not cool to be South African. That's the other one. Eh? yeah, white apartheid bastard.
Maybe in the same month as the Instagram post, you popped into a cafe and drank a latte made using Murray's Firefly Coffee. Now, I'm guessing you knew nothing about Murray. And even if you had heard his name, you were probably relying on your roaster to give you the facts. And these roasters got a pretty basic fact wrong about Murray. Now, that same roaster who published the Instagram post also published a transparency report in the same year. The subtext was, "Don't worry, we've got our coffee farmers' interests at heart." But let's look again at that photo. Those 6 buckets will make about 250 espressos. Murray's total profit from those 6 buckets would be $2. Not $2 per bucket. $2 for all 6. How does one of the most famous coffee farmers in all of Ecuador earn just $2 profit from 250 espressos? What's going on here behind the scenes? Well, for once, let's hear the real story behind the glossy Instagram photos. Because the reality might change how you look at your next cup of coffee. I'm James Harper, and this is Filter Stories. The untold stories hidden in your cup of coffee. To fully appreciate what was happening behind the scenes in that Instagram photo, we need to start the story right at the time Murray leaves South Africa. He's in his mid-20s, behind a desk, super corporate marketing gig. He's been doing it for 5 years, and he realizes it's not for him.
So marketing really is just trying to bluff you to buy stuff you don't need, and just took 6 months off working, but the 6 months turned into a year and faded away.
Okay, here's a question for you. What would happen if you quit your job right now and you went traveling the world with no plans to ever go back? I'll try and sum up 11 years of Murray's life in 2 minutes. Murray heads to California and he falls in with a crowd of conservation activists. Think Greenpeace, tree huggers, you get the idea. And he asks them, what can I do to help the global conservation movement?
And these guys said Ecuador, I came down to Ecuador and it kind of all happened immediately. It was all sort of destiny.
Murray lands in Ecuador and then he meets somebody who knows somebody who needs help to protect the rainforest. And before long, Murray is there full-time managing a science base in the middle of the Los Cedros rainforest.
It's where I ended up staying and living for 11 years.
Murray's gone from a desk job to living in a jungle with no electricity for 11 years.
So, we had no power, no music, no lights, just candles and for 11 years. It was rough.
Murray helps the Los Cedros rainforest grow from 80 hectares to over 6,000, and it becomes a legally protected forest. At one point, while living in the jungle, Murray starts to take photographs.
I started taking a few pictures, and that was for fundraising. I could see that I had a bit of an eye, and people said, hey, you take good pictures, whatever, but that's being polite.
Murray goes on to become one of the most respected bird photographers in all of South America. His photos have appeared in places like National Geographic. And at one point, he also finds love. He meets a local Ecuadorian called Patricia, and she comes to live with him in his rainforest shack. How did you end up going from Quito to the middle of a jungle?
Because I love it. I always loved the jungle, and that was my dream coming true.
For 5 years, Patricia and Murray lived together in the jungle. What compelled you to stay for over 10 years?
No, I think I probably would still be living there if I hadn't started a family. And my wife, she wasn't keen on living like the whole 8 hours by mule with kids,
This is when the story shifts from a never-ending career break to coffee.
So, welcome, guys.
I'm with Murray in his 10-year-old Nissan Patrol, and we're driving into the farm.
The house. Right. There was no garden. This is all mine.
I'm here to learn why he started the farm and how he ended up earning just $2 profit for 6 buckets of coffee cherries. So I step out of the car and just, wow!
So it's a beautiful spot. Bought the farm for its beauty because it's on a high ridge. So you got 300-degree view of mountains and lots of forest. And we see 2 volcanoes.
Murray calls this farm Firefly because at night, 1,000 little lights flicker in the dark. Murray and Patricia bought this 30-hectare piece of land with the leftovers of Murray's savings from South Africa and a generous donation. The year is now 2010, and Murray is taking a look into the future.
I had a piece of land, I had a farm. I wasn't really using it. Then I started looking at what would grow here, and coffee was the one, it's the perfect climate for coffee.
But what about photography? Why doesn't he just stick to taking photographs of birds?
I say I preferred coffee farming to photography. It was a most noble retirement for myself. That's sort of how I saw it as my retirement plan. I don't have medical and retirement or any insurance. I've always worked for myself. And so I have no nest egg for the later years. So this was kind of my nest egg, something that would keep me happy and busy and doing something I loved, without having to get in a car and drive around and airplanes, this kind of stuff that's associated to photography.
But relying on the farm for his retirement is a big risk. Back in 2010, Ecuador hardly grew specialty coffee. And there were so few people Murray could turn to for advice.
Well, my initial thing was I'd come from conservation, so it was all organic.
And right at the start, he makes a big mistake.
What's the word? I had technical advice from a local guy who was unfortunately the most really radically organic coffee farming guy in the whole of Ecuador. I didn't know that at the time. So he had me with so much shade that I could never produce coffee under that stuff.
When did you get your first harvest?
3 years, but that was the first sign of organic, because at 3 years you should be harvesting something, Right. I mean, they say 2 pounds a plant, and we were just getting grams, so there was just not much coffee on the trees. So it cost us probably quite a bit of money there.
Murray has now wasted a good chunk of his savings. And it's around this time that Murray learned something very important.
It's all to do with the la taza, the cup, It's all to do with points and where you are on your points.
Specialty coffee is all about points. The better your coffee tastes, the more points it's going to get, and that means you can earn more money.
And I saw straight away that really the way to go was try and produce specialty coffee, even though it's gonna cost me a little more time, but I can always sell my coffee and hopefully for a premium price.
And so, for the next harvest in 2016, Murray focuses on increasing his points. What will the coffee world say when they finally get to taste Murray's improved Firefly beans? It's now lunchtime on the farm, Murray grates an onion,
The onion first had lemon on it.
mixes it together with freshly squeezed orange and lemon juice, and then he pours it over tender raw fish and squeaky popcorn.
So this is a Ecuadorian ceviche from Manabi.
The year is now 2016. Murray's hoping that his coffee tastes great so he can get paid amazing prices. And there's really good news. The best roasters from across the world start buying Murray's Firefly Coffee. They come all the way to Ecuador to see his farm. And Murray cooks delicious meals for them, just like he's doing for us right now.
It's good. It's good. Nobody's going to be bitching. It's taken us a while to find specialty coffee from Ecuador.
Murray's reading from the website of a large specialty Australian roaster, where they chose his coffee as their coffee of the month in December 2016. What does it make you think, reading that?
It makes me feel like we had decent coffee, you know? It wasn't Nescafe, that's for sure.
One of the reasons Murray's coffee tastes so great is because he's managing the farm incredibly well. I speak with Juan Carlos Vega, a senior consultant hired by the Ecuadorian government to assist farmers like Murray with technical issues. I ask him how Murray's farm compares to others he has seen in the region.
I would say at least in the top 5. He put so much emotion and so much heart into the work, and at the end, he got one of the best coffees in the region. I mean, the results was amazing.
Murray has cracked it. From the outside, it looks like he's figured out how to run a successful specialty coffee farm. Except, well, he hasn't.
The tech people give you the maths. So you've got this a very clear thing of where you're going to go with this. And then at the end of harvest, it just doesn't, the sums just don't add up. You know, the maths is wrong. And my main problem was price was selling. That's where the problems started to happen with, the sales.
Murray needs to sell his coffee for a high price and get paid fast. But the specialty coffee middlemen that Murray was selling to couldn't pay him high and fast. They can pay fast or they can pay high, but not both. And that's because they are facing problems of their own. Very few people want to buy Ecuadorian coffee.
Because of costs, because the production costs are really high, so Ecuadorian coffee is really expensive.
This is Gil, a founder of one of the smaller companies buying green coffee in Ecuador.
And in comparison with Colombian coffee, with Peruvian coffee, with Central American coffee, for the same quality, our coffee is more expensive. So obviously buyers, they will say no.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem in the whole deal is really that Ecuador is expensive to produce.
Murray is spending $2.20 to produce 1 pound of coffee.
Colombia's like 140, Africa's like 60 cents a pound, and Nicaragua's like $1. I can't remember exactly the details, but it's like we are the most expensive after Hawaii or something, you know.
And one of the biggest reasons Ecuadorian coffee is so expensive is because hiring people is not cheap anymore.
That was also the stage where labor became more expensive, and the government just got really strict about that. So you had to have your workers with social security, all that stuff. Oh, really? And there was huge fines if you didn't.
Murray doesn't want to break the law. But more importantly, he wants to do better than the minimum wage.
I paid above the standard wage, always like $100 more. I was happy to have, a little less profit for myself so that some people could have a lot better life.
So Murray is now paying about $20 a day to each of his workers. Now that is double what that same worker could earn in neighboring Colombia. What is the impact of paying that little bit extra?
And there was a family that started working with me. Their kids weren't even in school. Now the whole family has a motorbike. They've fixed their farm up and they fixed their house up, and I gave them a piece of land and they really set up. So now I changed one small family's life, in a big way.
But Murray is not getting paid any extra for the fact he's changing people's lives. And his costs are really high, especially during harvest time.
So you have to have, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a week to be able to pay your harvesters. So that's a big problem.
Yeah. How do you keep this going cash flow wise?
Hey, scraping. All I didn't do is go out in the street and try and sell my arse. So I stopped. But I was just doing whatever. Just, it was hard.
Murray gets so desperate, he begins to sell whatever he can.
The one time I didn't have money for fertilizer and we just sold the car. And it was a damn nice Volvo that I had. Kind of oldish, but it was really good shape, and I didn't get any money for it because it was a stupid thing to sell, and I sold it for shite because I needed the money quick. So the first guy, I was just like, dude, whatever you want to give me,
Murray is realizing a painful reality about the specialty coffee world. Buyers are only interested in getting the best quality for the lowest price. But what about the fact Murray's workers could send their kids to school? What about the fact his farm was so ecological? Surely that's worth something in the specialty coffee world? Murray is clearly seeing roasters are not putting money where their mouths are. For these roasters, their number one priority is a good tasting coffee at the lowest price. If there's something good to say about ecology and farm workers, then they'll include it as a bonus. But if there's nothing good to say, they'll say nothing. And all the while, they would come to visit him on the farm.
There's a lot of people that come to visit you. I'm like this famous farm now, and I had from the whole globe. Unbelievable.
They would take photographs, then splash them across Instagram and talk about how much they have the farmer's interests at heart.
And they all promise all kinds of stuff, and then nothing seems to materialize.
And all the while, Murray is going broke. I want to get up close and see for myself what a well-managed farm looks like. So after lunch, we stroll through Murray's neatly pruned rows of coffee trees. We pick off dark red coffee cherries, and they are so good. It's just like apricot candy.
Yum. Oh, yum.
Amazing.
And then overhead fly a flock of parrots. Their feathers are deep blue with flashes of yellow.
Bronze-winged parrots.
These birds, these ecologically friendly coffee trees, the happy workers. Why aren't roasters paying more for this? A few hours later, darkness descends on the farm, and 1,000 fireflies come out to dance. The year is now 2017. Murray's entire life savings are in this farm. It's the only property he owns in the world.
I'm going to just do everything I can to make it perfect.
His plan is to increase the quality of the coffee even more and maybe, just maybe, earn enough money to keep the farm alive.
So I was doing I'm a worker. So I had my own jobs there, and I was working 15, 14 hours a day.
Murray is working so hard to produce high-quality coffee that it's even affecting his sleeping.
I was waking up. I still can't sleep very well because in 2017, with the ferments, I just decided to do as much as I could.
Murray wakes up multiple times a night. He gets out of bed, walks down to his shed, and grabs a stick. Red-eyed and half awake, Murray stirs these big vats of coffee as fireflies dance all around him. He is hoping to balance out the fermentation just a little bit. And with every circle he draws in the water, Murray is hoping to up his points to earn just a few cents extra per pound.
And everyone sort of said that was crazy, but that's what they said I should do. So I was doing that for, 4 months, waking up 3 times a night and not sleeping.
Murray is beginning to think he needs to quit.
I just started, had a good look into the future and decided that, okay, if I'm not going to make it this year.
But then the world finally gets to taste Murray's coffee, and it's exceptional. It's so good that the Ecuadorian barista champion chooses Murray's coffee to represent Ecuador on the world stage.
So the first person that I approached to produce this coffee was my dear friend Murray Cooper.
This is Mario Idrovo, the 2017 Ecuadorian barista champion, and he's showcasing Murray's Firefly Coffee to a panel of expert judges at the World Barista Championships.
So guys, I want you to write the following down. You will perceive an aroma of cinnamon, notes of raspberries, and green apple.
Let's take a second to put this in context. Just 7 years ago, Murray started a farm from nothing. And now he's producing coffee with flavors of cinnamon, raspberry, and green apple. These are flavors you would have struggled to find in Ecuador just 10 years ago. And now, with the marketing push of having his coffee at the World Barista Championships, I mean, it's one of the highest accolades in the specialty coffee world. He might have roasters calling him every single day, fighting amongst themselves to have his coffee. And Murray might finally start to get really good prices. But as Murray is stirring these vats of coffee in the middle of the night, there's a thought that just won't go away.
I got some honest coffee growers who told me honest profits that they were getting, and it just wasn't much, you know.
What did they tell you?
You know, if he makes 2,000 a hectare, profit at the end of it all. Maybe you can get 28,000 or 30,000.
Murray is facing another difficult reality about specialty coffee. Coffees that can be used for the World Barista Championships need even more work. And Murray is spent, tapped out, physically exhausted. In total, he produces about 100 kilos of the Barista Championship coffee. But there isn't any extra to sell to get the very high prices. This means his total maximum profit can only be $2,000 a hectare. I mean, that's fine if you want to live a very simple life in rural Ecuador.
Unfortunately, it all goes back to lifestyle choices. And if I was living on a farm, my family were going to the local government school that didn't cost anything, and we were growing a few veggies and living off 500 a month, you know, we could do it.
And back in the early days, they did try to do it. He lived with his family on the farm. They even sent their son to the local government school. But it was not working out. Here's Murray's wife, Patricia.
He's a gringo and he looks like he's blonde and white. But another friends, a local people doesn't accept him because he's different.
And that was not the end of Luke's problems either.
So there were some big scandals just while we were there. I don't know, kind of abuse and stuff like that, pretty bad.
Patricia and Murray wanted what was best for their kids. You know, just a decent education in a safe space. And so they rented a house in the capital, Quito, and sent their kids to a decent school. But all of this costs a lot of money.
But yeah, 30,000 would be really hard.
So remember the Instagram photo at the beginning? You know, the one of Murray standing in between 6 buckets of coffee cherries? What you can't see in that photo is the most important thing in Murray's life, his family. Murray has a dilemma. He cannot afford to give his kids a decent education and at the same time produce some of the best coffee in Ecuador.
And I just figured that if I keep holding on to this, you know, it's like flogging a dead horse, you know, it just felt like I was doing that. And if I kept holding on to it, and then what would happen is I'd be like totally bankrupt. So I just saw that it was going downhill, and I needed to try and sell the farm while it was still looking good. I'd rather not have done it if now that I'm selling the farm and everything, I'm going to get something back for it, but not really. I'm not going to even really cover my investment, and it's not like I'm going to make anything really off it. Yeah.
We wake up very early on Firefly Farm, a farm that Murray does not own anymore. I grind some coffee in Murray's old-fashioned metal grinder. We taste sweet caramel as we sip the coffee, staring out over the mountain peaks through the morning mist. This is the last coffee I will ever drink from Firefly Farm. I first heard of Murray's story in December 2017 when I spoke to Mario Hidrovo, you know, the Ecuadorian barista champion. What amazes me about this story is that he could not have had a better chance at making this coffee farm work. For example, he's got white privilege. He is a world-famous photographer. He speaks perfect English and has connections with the best roasters across the world. And despite all of that, he fails. No one roaster or middleman is to blame here. As an industry, we asked Murray to produce the best tasting coffee he could, and we expected him to take all the risk. He gave 8 years of his life and put his entire life savings into the farm. And as he was struggling to make it work, maybe you strolled into a coffee shop one morning and ordered his coffee. Fast forward a year, and you stroll into that same coffee shop again. And now Firefly has been scrubbed off the board. And a new Ecuadorian coffee is written in chalk over the faint outline of Firefly. He was forgotten as quick as it took you to finish your latte. Other coffee farmers in Ecuador are following the path that Murray made. And for them, Murray is another example of failure that they're going to have to learn from to survive. Maybe they will make it. Maybe they won't. Maybe it depends on you. If you would like to help the situation, here are a couple of tips. Think for a second, well, what is your favorite coffee right now? Is the same thing that Murray went through happening to the person who grew your favorite coffee? Now, if you'd like to know, just Google the farm's name. Most larger farmers like Murray are very active on social media. Reach out to them directly. Tell them what you thought of the coffee and ask what is their situation. Get the real story behind the Instagram post. Then turn around and ask your cafes and your roasters to support this farmer by buying the same coffee next year and the year after. Commitment. And if you are willing to pay more for this coffee, ask them to pay more for it too.
It seems like that, these things should be able to work. Okay, I bankrupted myself, everything, but I'm still driving a car, and I'm eating some decent food, and I'm having an okay life. I can't complain. I'm on the lucky side of the scale, really. There's a lot of farmers out there that are only just managing to, put food on the table and other stuff. A lot of the coffee buyers sitting down in Seattle when they have their cappuccino in the morning, and the guy says, well, if you give me 20 cents more, it's going to make a difference back home. They might put it on the table, but if they came down here and saw how those people are living and saw the reality of some of the producers, I'm quite sure that they'd be happy to put 50 cents more on the table just to make a difference in someone's life. It's not a hell of a lot to ask, and you can make a huge difference. Yeah.
If you're a roaster or a cafe, I've written an article at Perfect Daily Grind about Ecuadorian coffee and ways you can support farmers like Murray in the future. Check out filterstories.org for links. Thank you for listening to the second episode of Filter Stories. This episode was incredibly complicated to make. I easily put in more than 200 hours, including a very expensive flight to Ecuador. So if you want more stories like this, please tell your friends about Filter Stories. Also, did you know the most popular podcast player is Apple's podcast app? So please write a review on iTunes. It's like an internet megaphone. And now, people I need to thank. The eye-popping Filter Stories logo was created by Headquarters, a very talented branding and packaging design team. Check out Headquarters' other fantastic work on their website, www.headquarters.studio. A big thanks to Dom Edgley for sound engineering this episode. Check out filterstories.org to find his contact details if you need a sound engineer. Now, people in Ecuador I want to thank for offering me their time and trust. Murray and his entire family, Mario Idrovo, Gil Honegger of 4 Worlds, a green sourcing company offering something closer to direct trade, Linda and the helpful folk at Minka Hostel in Quito, Mario Herves, Benjamin Villegas, Gerardo Diaz, Jeff Meacham, and Juan Carlos Vega, and the many, many other people I spoke to regarding this story. A big thank you to the people who provided editorial feedback on drafts of the show. Raymond Detweiler, Vasant Chari, Jake Warren of the Message Heard podcast, Jen Rugolo, Melanie Burmer, the journalist behind melscoffeetravels.com, Jessica Green, Ian Johnson, Howard Bryman, Phil Groves, Stuart Ritson, and Josh Fonteca. I produced and edited the show and wrote and performed the piano music. Do you have a story idea for me? Email me at hello@filterstories.org. Follow Filter Stories on Instagram at Filter Stories Podcast, and visit filterstories.org to sign up to the newsletter. Until next time.